the takeover, I wanted to look at this. Do you agree with The Athletic? The Athletic have claimed, by speaking to 20 leading agents in the game, 6 of them voted for Benjamin Sesko, they believe is the worst deal of the summer transfer window, above Trafford, above Wissa, above Jadon Sancho to Villa. You obviously can see Evan Ferguson on there. There's Connor Cody's even made it onto that list, which I find an interesting one. Viet's got 1 vote and Isak got 1 vote, but he only started 2 Premier League games, Sesko, because he didn't have a preseason, but he scored 2 goals in those 2 starts. But I'll go to George first. Would you agree with these journalists and these agents? Benjamin Sesko, has he been the worst signing of the summer?
I'd love to know what it's based on, because I'm really confused as to what they're judging it over. Is it judged on, what he was before he came to Man United and the package of the deal? Is it his performance since he's come and compared to the package of his deal? I think I need some clarification regarding that just to really judge what they mean, because honestly, I can't see how it would, for either sides, when I'm looking at it for a deal wise, as much as it was a lot of money, I don't think it was the worst deal of the summer. I feel like we saw other deals that were just as bad, or if not way worse. I think Alanga for 55 million, not seeing it on that list is crazy. He's probably one of the worst deals of the summer for me personally, when you look at value wise. Jamie Gittins, I saw he had 1 vote. I don't think it's a bit crazy, man. Sesko's performed pretty decent. Like I said, he's got a few goals. He started to pick up some form, looking a bit more like himself, some confidence. And I'm not being funny, there was a few teams after him. It wasn't like it was just Man United that wanted him. So naturally, the price went up because of the competition. So yeah, I don't know what metric they're judging this by to have it as the worst deal, to be honest, because it shouldn't be.
Yeah, in the article, we haven't read the full one yet, so I'm not going to completely slam The Athletic, but I will say that's nonsense. But in the article, do they explain why? Because that's what we need to know. Because if there's an explanation from an agent,
sorry to interject. Yeah. I couldn't find an article. So I'm on, unless I missed it, I'm on their website. I'm on their website now. I'm on it's only just come out this morning. They've released this, so maybe the article is coming later. But I'm looking. I can't see any article that's titled like about this on here. There's agent survey from best to worst deals. Here it is. Yeah. So let's just read this here. It says, "Welcome to the Athletics agent survey, which analyzes a record-breaking summer. Over the past month or so, the Athletic asked 20 agents to answer a series of questions on the back of the summer transfer activity, predominantly looking at the Premier League. We wanted to know what their thoughts were on the best and worst deals, which Premier League clubs had the most to smile about after the window, and which 3 teams appeared doomed to relegation." So they asked them, like, what was the deal? So they asked him, like, what was the deal of the summer, which got voted as Donnarumma was voted the highest. They then got asked which was the worst deal of the window, which most, just as an outright question, and 6 of the 20 voted for Benjamin Sesko. So it was just a straight question along those lines.
Yeah, and there's my problem. There lies my problem, because I don't understand why. Because if we're gonna really look at it, like they say James Trafford. But when James Trafford was signed at Man City, they was praising it. The only reason why they're calling it a bad deal now is because they signed Donnarumma like afterwards. And now Donnarumma is seen as the best signing of the summer. But that doesn't mean James Trafford was initially bad. It just looks silly now, but it wasn't actually bad at the time because they got a mad discount because of the clauses. So I wouldn't even say that's a bad deal because of how they got him. Like you got, like George said, Jamie Gittins for 50 to 55 million. A young player is not really done much in the game. But hey, listen, Buonanotte on there, and I agree. Why did Chelsea sign Buonanotte? It don't make any sense. You have as much as Walter Marder has started off really well at that time, the price they paid for him was also crazy. You know what I'm saying? So if you're looking at Walter Marder and Sesko's performance in the Premier League, they've done output-wise, they've done pretty similar. You know what I mean? Walter Marder's had more of a chance to shine because his team is better and he's had more starts and he's performing well. But Sesko isn't like he's just done absolutely rubbish. He's been bleeding in, he's been slowly developing into this team, and now he's starting to look like he's a striker that can develop into a top striker at Man United. Well, if he does, that's another question altogether because we know what the history of Man United is right now. But there's no reason for him to be there. You could say Wissa is worse because he's been injured. since being there. Like, and they paid above the premium for Wissa as well. So I don't know why they said Benjamin Sesko. Maybe there's some agents with a grudge against Man United because maybe one of their players didn't get bought when they wanted their payday from United, never got it. You know what I mean? Like, we need to know who these guys are and what the reasoning is and what's the metric for what makes a signing good or bad in their eyes. Because for me, it doesn't make sense.
Well, that's my issue with the article. I remember I had a meeting with The Athletic about 7 years or so ago now, before anyone had even heard of them. And they actually did work with some content creators. And I remember they reached back out to me and said, yeah, look, they were saying, oh, we want to get a few YouTubers involved. And I could tell just through the meeting that it was never going to work between them and I. Because they were like, well, what's one of your favorite things to do? And people think I've only done this in the last 3 years for Arsenal. But I've always called out media narratives that didn't make sense. And I showed them the content I like making. And I could tell, I remember one guy on the call, like we had a video call, and he was like, I could tell by his face, he's like, shit, that means you're gonna come for our articles. But only if they're full of shit. But what I liked about The Athletic to begin with was it wasn't this type of it wasn't like this. Now, I think it's absolutely fair for football fans to have some fun and make content like this, because that's how football fans talk. What I loved about The Athletic at the beginning, but they still have articles that are like it, by the way. It was like, I think Ornstein, typically when you read his art, that's why when the Newcastle fans were coming for Ornstein in the summer, I couldn't help but laugh. They were like, he's so unbalanced. I'm like, but I just read the article. He says what Isak thinks, but then he also puts into the article Newcastle's take. That's the epitome of balance unlike the Newcastle press that never printed a single thing that came from the opposite side. But anyway, so many of their articles now are like this. They're telling us the answer to the question, but they're not giving us any rationale to why this was decided. And there's a super chat here, which I think is meant to be a bit of a dig, but it says, judging it by the long term, it's totally fair considering our track record of signing long-term flops. I actually agree with this comment. If those 6 journalists said, look, rate the player, but Man United's track record of buying strikers is awful. Their track record in recent years of big signings has been bad. Their inability in the last 3 or 4 years to develop younger players is terrible. Therefore, we think it's a bad deal. I don't necessarily think that's bad, but the fact they're not providing us with any rationale for The Athletic, who are a 100% paid subscription-based website, you can't get free articles unless you use 12-foot ladder. Just putting that out there. I do think it's really poor. It's really, really poor. And I think, as Lou says in the comments, you can tell it's the international, you can tell it's the international break. It's one of those. And there hasn't been too much to rip into Man United about this window. We won the final game before going into it. But yet it still feels that every step of the way, there's this element of how can we print another negative story about Manchester United? And this just feeds into that narrative for me.
You got DJ. Thank you for saying this. Sesko has been asked for 75 million. Why are Terry and KJ crying about it? But Wirtz had 1 vote. So if you're gonna go by price tag and performance, Wirtz is so much worse than Sesko. And then they should have been voted higher. And this is what makes the whole article funny. That the same publication was showing, it was had an article out saying why you shouldn't criticize Wirtz, why you should give players time, why you should, At the same time, the next article is, here's why this player's a flop.
And that's a duplicity in this. It's, if you're going to do this kind of content, then it's fine. I'm not going to take it personally, but you literally did a whole massive in-depth think piece that had multiple journalist names attached to it about Wirtz is being judged too early. It's bad for the game, X, Y, and Z. To which I agree with, because I feel that we are far too quick to judge players now, but yet they do a very small, it will be very big in terms of the numbers of eyes that see this, but an article that is about as deep as a worm's grave in terms of breaking down the rationales and the reasoning. So, exactly. Exactly. So it's like one big think piece, and this is why football fans get annoyed. So you're defending Wirtz, which is fine, but yet you're putting out this nothing article that's going to, that's going to put more pressure on a Benjamin Sesko, going to create more of a narrative. And when you say Benjamin Sesko has been asked, I see people say, oh, look, Isak has got to adapt to his new team, didn't have a preseason, give him time. But that is a player that we were saying, when I say we, I'm talking the collective. People were saying the best striker in the world or one of the best in the world last year. Benjamin Sesko, no preseason with Man United, only started 2 games, scored in both of them. He's got to be called out for not being at the absolute top right now. That's where I understand football fans getting frustrated, and I will call it out. There is an absolute duplicity and a nonsense in those 2 takes. And for them, again, if fans are just doing it, fine. But you can't have the mainstream media defending one player or one group of players and then doing hit pieces like this on others. That for me is disgusting, personally.
And do you know what it is with it? It's like you said there. I feel like for Athletic, it's a stoop low. Because if this was Bleacher Report or something like that, I'd be like, oh yeah, it makes sense. ESPN, yeah, they make these types of lists. This is just what they do, you know, trying to farm some engagement with fans and get in touch with fans, get them to respond to it and say, no, this isn't. I would make sense. But with Athletic, you expect them to just stick to the informative pieces, like what they've done with Verts. That's the type of content I expect from the Athletic. But I would also expect them to do the same thing for, oh, why hasn't Gyökeres or Sesko scored that many goals this season? Here's why. The managers, And I want to learn more about the analytical side of the game rather than this. Just like this is stuff we see on YouTube, man. Like, what is the worst deal with no context? Like, come on.
And if the agents say all agree it's Sesko, let us know why from their perspective, because I don't know what agents think. I don't know what goes through their minds when assessing deals, what's a good deal, a bad deal. So let me know that. So, like you said at the start, Terry, if they had a reasoning why, I don't think we would complain. We'll just be like, okay, maybe we disagree, but I can see why that's from their point of view. That's a different angle of football. I'm cool with that. But when it's just straight up, who's good, who's bad? Yeah, it's them. Like, it's useless to me, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's just too bland. Like, it's just, what's the worst deal? It could be, oh, the agent doesn't like the deal because the percentages are pretty low for the agent fees. Like, he might be looking at it from his own perspective rather than what the deal brings to Man United. Players, they might be looking at it from the Leipzig perspective of what did Leipzig get? Was it a good deal for them? Like, we don't know what perspective they're looking at. There's just a blank, was it a good deal? It don't really make sense.
1 second, peeps.
Okay.
I'm just messaging someone in the group chat. It's like people. It's the if buts and maybe conversation again. Anton, if you're watching, I will message you afterwards. After the stream, I will explain, because I do think if buts and maybes are an important part of debate. And maybe Anton's listening to it now, and I can say why. Anton, you're someone that brings stats to the table, and you will show a detailed breakdown of the stats. So you did a thing about how Liverpool had one of the easiest starts to the league, and how Arsenal have had one of the hardest starts to the league. That's an if, but, and a maybe. So you're looking at that and going, if you look at the results, with a hard start for Arsenal and an easy start statistically for Liverpool, based on your own words, that is an if and a but and a maybe, in the sense of, if you then extrapolate the performances, the goals conceded, the results, and then you turn the fixture list to Arsenal having an easier run and Liverpool having a harder run, that is what's telling you that Arsenal are now the favourites to win the league. But it's an if and a but and a maybe, is if Liverpool's form stays the same, if Arsenal's form stays the same, if injuries don't kick in, if the referees get their decisions right in games. You can't have a conversation in football when it comes to predicting or looking at the future and not suggest this. I still wouldn't drop a massive amount of money on Dembele. I don't care that he's won the Ballon d'Or, because I'm not sure that his injuries are going to hold up for the foreseeable future. So maybe you drop 120 million on the Ballon d'Or winner, but maybe the injuries come back. You have to factor if, buts, and maybes, maybe not those words exactly, into your thinking when talking about football, especially when you're talking about the planning of the future of the game, predictions, what you would like to see happen. You have to. If you don't factor, they're an important part of debate. It's how our minds literally work as human beings. You actually deep what you do every day. It's an if, but, and a maybe. Oh, if I go to the gym now, I'm going to be rushing for that meeting later, so maybe I'll go later. You all do it all day. The idea that if, buts, and maybe should be excluded from thought, I find it one of the wildest takes ever. It doesn't even make sense. Try and think about anything without an if, a but, and a maybe coming into your mind, and then tell me why we should remove it from debate. Anyway, that was a side note, but let's get back to the topics.